Well, you got a few CDs, DVDs, and a bunch of stuff in the background.
Yeah.
Wow. Up,
Oh
and
man.
I see an old troll sitting on your desk.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got a lot of things I'm excited to talk to you about, you
Look at
know?
that. You got I see also Blade
Yeah.
sitting there, right? The
Yes, sir.
Puppet Masters, right? There you go.
Yeah. Big fan of you and your brother Charles. Real big, long time fan.
You got a shitload of stuff there, man. Wow.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Mr. Ben, I'm already rolling. That way we can get it going. And first of all, I want to tell you, just I want to get it out the way.
First of all, wait.
Yes,
First
sir.
of all, just call me Richard.
Richard. Okay. Just so much respect. I just want to be respectful. Um, I want to thank you. It's been a long time in the making. Obviously, you're a very busy man, and I really appreciate you just giving me a little bit of your time to talk about your career. And I know my audience is gonna really love this. And it's great to have the musician on the show to talk about your career. And yeah, just thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. And to whoever is going to be listening, you said you had quite a few fans. What do you say? I said something like 26,000 followers or something. Something.
Almost 23,000, something
Where
around
are
there.
they most geographically?
A lot of them are US, but I got a lot of people from the UK that watch. A lot, yeah. So a lot of US and Europe. That's where a lot of my viewers are.
And where are you actually?
I'm in Louisiana.
Louisiana. So
Yes,
would you
sir.
say, as far as the U.S. concerned, you think it's more uh, regional in your area, or is it all over? Or
No.
with the internet, it can be anywhere, obviously.
Yes, sir. Like in the United States, yeah, I have people that reach out to me from Nebraska, California, New York, you name it, Pennsylvania. People have reached out to me from, I think, all 50 states at this point. So it's
Oh,
yeah,
that's
um,
great. That's great. And how much have you grown, like let's say in the last year, viewership wise?
a lot. I've been putting a lot. I feel like I'm being interviewed. I've been putting a lot of focus on my YouTube channel over the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, and I've really started to just putting in the work, the videos, and all that sort of thing. And it's been doing good. And I talk a lot about the movies you've scored and a lot of Charles's movies, and that's honestly my audience. I know my audience is so happy for me because a lot of the films that you've scored and your brothers made are literally like some of my favorite films to talk about on the channel.
Oh,
And I've talked a lot about them and pushed a lot of them to my audience, especially some of the hidden gems in like the Empire catalog and things like that.
sure, sure. Well, cool,
Yeah.
cool. Well, good for
So
you. Good for
yeah,
you.
thank you. I would like to ask you, I read Charles's book that came out a few years ago. Um, you had to have grown up in Italy as well as a kid with him, right? Or did you grow up exclusively in the States?
No, 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 no. We grew up together in Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were all together going back to 19. I think it was like 1959 when my father moved us over there to do a film in Sweden originally called The Face of Fire. Excellent film. And after we were there about, I guess, 5 months or so, something like that. And then we moved to Paris after Sweden for about a year. And then from Paris, my father took us to Italy, where we stayed for, about 11 years. That's where we grew up. So yeah, we were together the whole time up until 1971, 70 or 71. Can't remember right now when we all came back to the United States.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to remember the details of this, but was your parents or grandparents like? Was there almost a chance that you and your brother were almost never could have been alive because something happened with either your father or your grandfather where he was protected by somebody high up in government that like pulled him out of
Yes, that's yeah. High up meaning the president, President Roosevelt. Yes,
Roosevelt?
that's correct. Well, during at at the beginning, well, not the beginning. Well, yes, somewhat at the beginning. Um, my grandparents, Max Band, and my grandmother Bertha Band, and my father, they were living in Paris. This is obviously before I was born, and then the war started, and because my grandfather was a pretty well known artist, painter and sculptor, he had made, I think, one visit to the United States with a lot of cultural people, and there was a lot of notoriety. He was good friends with like Chagall and Monet, and so there was that high circle of people, artists, and all that, and there was a connection with the White House.
Right.
Anyway, to make a long story short, what happened was that my grandfather was commissioned to do Roosevelt's portrait, which hangs in the White House today, by the way. And so they, meaning my grandfather, grandmother, and my dad, they came to the United States. They moved here, and it was literally a matter of weeks before the Nazis
Right. Oh,
invaded France. So yes, had my grandfather not gotten that commission and been invited here by Roosevelt, we wouldn't be talking. That's true.
yeah, absolutely. When I was reading that, I was just like, wow, like it's amazing the stuff I was learning in that. Now, I gotta ask you this, Richard. Were you the more chilled out, quiet of the two? Because it seems like Charles was rambunctious, working on this, doing all kinds of stuff. Were you of the more chilled, laid back son of the two that stayed out of trouble, basically?
I don't know if stayed out of trouble is true, but I would say overall, yeah, I'm more laid back. I was in love with music from the age of like 11. That's when I started playing guitar originally, and obviously before that, my father was a big lover of music as well, and when I guess I was like 6 or 7 years old. When we were living in Paris for that year. I would come home from school and almost on a daily basis come home and put on Beethoven's Fifth and Ninth Symphony in my living room after school,
Mhm.
and stand up on the dining room table and air conduct it from beginning to end. That was like one of my passions. So I was into music, very early, and it really hit when I went to Spain with my family. My father was doing a western. He was shooting a western in Spain.
Yeah.
Was during the summer, so my brother and I, we weren't in school at that point, so we went on location with him. And the first night in Madrid, Spain, we went out to a nice dinner and then walked across the square to a flamenco show. And at that flamenco show, it was the first time I ever heard guitar played like that. And I was so enamored of it that the next day I went out and bought a guitar and taught myself how to play. And that's actually where it all started.
Amazing. So, in terms of wanting to be a musician and things like that, you said your father was obviously a big music lover, but I'm assuming he was as busy as he was. I'm assuming he was not a musician himself.
No, no, I was the only musician in the family at that
Yeah.
point. Right. Yeah.
And I was reading online. Now, I couldn't get names of the bands or anything, but as you probably got into your teen years and stuff like that, what kind of you had to have been in bands at the time, right? Were you playing a lot of live shows and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. From like I said, I took up the guitar when I was about 11, and by the time I was roughly 12 years old, I started putting together my own bands and playing around Rome, Italy, in various venues. And by the age of 13, I was touring around most of Italy, you
Incredible.
know, and then once I hit a little bit older, 14, 15, my band played around various parts of Europe and did some tours and all that. It was almost like a freak show because here I was this young kid,
Right.
you know, with a few grown-ups in the band and touring around Italy and then Europe. So it was yeah, no, I had several bands, and that's what it was back then. It was a great existence, I'll tell you that.
It sounds
To have
yeah,
all that happening,
it
especially
sounds like it. Now, Were you able to during this time? Were you able to do any like recordings, anything on vinyl, reel to reel, anything like that with these bands, or was it really just
We did a few. They've long been lost. I probably have a couple of uh, like cassettes or something from
yeah?
50 odd years ago that are barely listenable. We didn't have the. I mean, yeah, we had reel to reels back then, but I think maybe we recorded ourselves once or twice. On some live shows, so the sound was horrible. Uh, but yeah, no. At towards the end, and when I say end, meaning the end when we just before we moved back uh, here from Italy, that's when we started. At least my band started getting some good notoriety, and we were starting to go into the studio and starting stuff. But then we kind of left in a hurry in 1970, and so that never came to fruition.
Mhm.
But it was a great existence. It was, that was the 1960s. Growing up in Italy in 1960s was a unique experience. It wasn't that long after the war, so Americans were adored by the Italians at that point. We liberated them. So just to be an American in the 1960s there was
You're a god,
yeah,
you know.
we were there was a certain automatic, almost celebrity status. Then to be in show business as well, because my father had show business, and to have a lot of the connections that we had was an added plus. And at that time, there were a lot of uh, very famous expatriates who lived in Rome at the time. I mean, Clint Eastwood was there doing the Sergio Leone westerns. Burt Lancaster, Loretta Young. I mean, there were so many, Gore Vidal, Norman Mailer. So there was a list of wonderful artists, authors, actors, celebrities of all sorts living in Italy at that time. And it was a very unique community for a period of years. Of course, at the very end of the 60s, started turning a little bit because of the sentiments against the Vietnam War and all that. But for a good, 8, 9, 10 years, it was like I said, being an American there was almost gave you a bit of a celebrity status.
Was there any hesitation? And what year did you come back to America? You said it was
I
70.
think it was 1970. It was 70 or 71. I think 70.
Was there any hesitation on your part? Did you say to yourself, I like it here?
Well, on my part, there was a lot of hesitation. After all, I was only like 17 going on 18.
Right.
Um, I had my band there that we were doing really well at that point. So, and plus I had grown up there. So you never
It's
want to,
home. Yeah.
that was home. Exactly. So you didn't really want to leave, but by necessity, the family, i.e. my father, the business changed over there dramatically and all that. And that it was time to come back to the States. And at 17, you don't really have an option, to just stay there. What am I going to do? I didn't
Right.
have the resources or even the desire. So it was not good timing for me, probably nor for my brother to leave home. That was our home. That's where we grew up. So it was tough and very tough coming back here at that time. But that's what it was.
I'd be remiss not to ask you about your father, Albert Band. I mean, as when you and Charlie were kids, I mean, were you guys kind of in awe of him? Was he an intimidating man? Because I've tried to find interviews and things with him, and I don't see a lot, and I don't hear too many stories about your father.
Well, there are a lot of stories, but for us, our father was dad. That's what he was, actually a very, very giving and loving person, and uh, always very supportive for both my brother and myself. And he was he was a great dad.
Yeah,
No question about it. Live having lived in again, having lived in Italy for those roughly 11 years, we kind of lived like kings there. I mean, it was a unique existence, very hard to replicate. You couldn't go
Yeah.
there today, even if you had millions of dollars, and really replicate it. It was very much tied to the times. It was tied to the movie business,
Right.
tied to a lot of things like that. But my father was he was a very loving, good father, and I guess that's why both my brother and I sort of, remained in films in one way or the other, over the years. Obviously, there was a lot of influence there, on various levels.
So after we get back to America, when does the inkling of working on music for film even start to ever become an idea for you?
Not for about 7 years. When I came back here, um, you have to remember I was, again, 17,
17, right?
18 years old. I actually hadn't graduated high school even back in Europe. I think I had done half of my senior year or whatever. So one question was whether I was going to, get my high school diploma and all
Uh-huh.
that. I didn't know anybody, literally not one person here, so it was very intimidating.
Right.
Uh, and I had known a pretty decent amount of success, in Italy when it came to music and playing around and all that. But it didn't take me too long to learn that at that time, especially being back here in the States, that every third person walking down the street wanted to be a rock and roll star. Everybody played music. It was
Sure.
not it was not the sort of thing that was kind of unique, like it was over in Europe. So I became rapidly discouraged with that dream and realized after I guess about a year, roughly speaking, that if I was going to be serious about music, that I had to start studying it. And, you know, and I'd say within a couple of years, I totally gave up on the idea of rock and roll or progressive jazz rock stuff that I was doing in Italy. It put it out of my mind.
Hmm.
And at that point, again, I hadn't graduated high school, so I figured, well, I better get that out of the way, and went to Los Angeles, just the city college here. To get into college, I figured, well, I didn't have a diploma, but at that time they could give you, I guess, equivalency exams or stuff like that, so that if you passed, you could go right into college, that sort of thing. I would imagine stuff like that kind of exists today. But anyway, so I'll never forget it. I went to the college to take this entrance exam to get into college, and I was totally freaked out because I was given the same entrance exam that I was given in Italy to get into high school. There was a massive difference in education.
Really?
It was massive. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So anyway, I got into college, and I spent about a year or so in college, and then I started studying. I transferred and went to a private college that specialized in music, and did a few years more formal training, in studying music. And that was the education part, of what happened. So that took me through like 1975-ish, something like that, somewhere in there, where I spent a few years, and then I got out of that, and I wasn't very conducive to academia. But about 2.5, 3 years into it, I got out and started studying privately with, a couple of composers and music teachers and stuff like that. But it wasn't until like 1977 that I really started thinking about scoring movies. Um, that was a different time. I guess at that time, roughly mid '70s, my father was doing some movies,
Hmm.
and my brother, he he started doing a couple of movies dating way back. And the family always kind of worked together in one capacity or the other. So with my dad on a couple of movies, I started, uh, learning the business a little bit, and was on set like as a production assistant, or stuff like that, to learn the production, which I was quite good at it. And it went from there to, then my brother started doing some movies. So we were all sort of working together in one capacity or the other. And then in 1970, I guess 7, if I'm right, yeah, roughly 77, an opportunity came up. Well, my brother had done this movie called Laser Blast,
Laser blast.
you're
Yeah.
familiar with.
Yes,
And
sir.
at that point, I had made friends with Joel Goldsmith, who was Jerry Goldsmith's son, who was at that time about 6, 7 years younger than I, but he was doing production sound on films. Anyway, we became friends, and lo and behold, this idea came up. Well, why not try, see if I can get an opportunity for Joel and I to do the score to Laser Blast. And so that's how it really, because of the Goldsmith name, the idea, there was the feeling with the distributor at the time, who was Compass International, head by led by Irwin Yablans, whose name to fame, he was the guy, the distributor that they released the original Halloween, so he
Yes,
made
sir.
a fortune with that.
Yeah.
And so basically, we needed his permission to give to see whether or not we would be able to score Laser Blast, which obviously we did, and that's how that first score came about, with a humongous budget of $1,000 for the entire score. So
Can
that's
see, okay, this is I'm so glad you're getting to this. This is so, because I would have assumed, I think naturally, that with your brother's involvement, you went to him to try to say, "Hey, what can we see about this?" But it's so interesting to know that it was you're telling me really it was the goal, because what this is what I wanted to ask. Coming to, America, did and I asked this not trying to make it sound disrespectful by any means, but did the name Albert Band carry a lot of weight in your life in America? Like, "Hey, I'm Albert Band's son," or things like that? Or did
no,
he was
no.
more of an underground kinda.
Well, not undergrad. No, it was. It just it. Even though my father had done some significant work before we all went to Europe. I mean, he worked with John Huston.
Right.
He wrote to the screenplay for the Red Badge of Courage, or classic movie, and he had done a lot of good work. He veered off from Houston at the time, roughly when Houston went to do the African Queen. That's when they kind of split up. They had been together for several years, working together. But I guess my father uh, realized at that point that if he went to Africa, that it would be something we'd be stuck there for probably at least a year, because John
Right.
Huston was a a hunting aficionado, and he was more interested in going to Africa to go hunting and stuff. And that's one of the reasons that the African Queen took almost a year to shoot. Even, I mean, the
Wow.
stories behind that, and plus people died, people got sick. It was, it was a crazy. If you read some of the history on about the shooting of the African Queen, it was like pretty insane. So I guess my father saw the writing on the wall, and that's when I guess the separation happened, and so he did not follow him to do that, and therefore, I guess within about a year or so, that I think that's one of the reasons we went off to Europe, because he had this opportunity to do the Face of Fire in Sweden, and then Paris, like I said, and then Rome. So that whole history. So no, it's not that the name Albert Band meant a whole lot here in Hollywood,
Right.
especially after being gone for at that point, 12, 13, 14 years from Hollywood. Even though a lot of the productions he did were Italian/American co-productions,
Right.
it wasn't that wasn't it.
So when you say, you get $1,000 between you and Goldsmith to make the score, can you break down, because this is fascinating to me and I don't get to talk to a lot of film composers about this. Can you break down to me what that means. Okay, you've got $1,000 to do this, because I'm assuming, do you have connections on a place to record this? Do you get video footage to work with? Like,
Okay, I'll give you a short version. Well, basically, that's like, I mean, that was, even in those days, it was the equivalent of, here, you do the score, we'll give you a cup of coffee. I mean,
exactly. Oh yeah.
it was a ridiculous amount of money. And so we had to use every resource between the two of us and conned our way into friends using their studios, borrowing synthesizers, getting friends to come in and play on session. It was everything you could imagine just to be able to pull it off. Because that, what can you do with $1,000? It's insane. So that's, that was the reality of it. What was your second part of your question?
What I find interesting is when you go to create a score for a movie, is the process just creating sounds that and themes that work good between the two of you, or are you seeing footage of the
Oh,
film to work
okay.
with?
Yeah, I forgot that. No, well, back in those days, you have to remember we didn't have any of the technology we have today. Today, you can get a QuickTime movie. You can preview what you're seeing on the screen. People these days, they'll track movies with other music to give a person an idea. None of this existed. Only the top maybe three or four composers in the whole business even had the chance to maybe have a moviola in their house, which, you know what a moviola is, right?
No.
No. Okay. Moviola was literally a little, well, not that little, it's pretty weighty, but about yay big. And you would literally put it like a little private projector. You'd have a little screen like this, and the actual film would go through it, but it made a clackety, clackety, clackety sound. It was what editors used back then, to edit film. So there was no way, 99% of the time, for us to view the film. So what would happen is, uh, usually what would happen is we would the composer or composers, they would have one screening of the cut of the movie and sit with the producer and or director, right, and a music editor, and they would go through the movie just, like in a projection room,
Okay.
and they would decide where you needed music, like this scene needs music, this scene doesn't need music, things you would spot the film. Okay. The music editor then would take the notes and then spend usually at least a week, because he'd have to go through the whole film and not only find, as what was decided, those sections that needed music, but then would have to break it down into seconds and milliseconds. Because let's say you just have a scene and a guy comes in, let's say, hits a guy, right? And you have to do that with the music. In a normal scene, you have literally dozens and sometimes hundreds of hit points that you have to do with the music. That's what scoring is. In those days, it was a mathematical equation, feet and frames, right? Because film was 24 frames a second,
Right.
and therefore tempo, you'd have to figure out in this very complicated book what tempo you were going to use to create the click track. Okay. And the click track is what determined how you would coordinate the music hitting all these different spots. So it was a very complicated calculation of mathematics back then. And so the music editor would prepare all of these music notes. So again, keeping in mind, we didn't have a chance to view this with the film. So we would get literally hundreds of pages of notes, and say for one scene, the first thing would say, okay, music in on guy being hit. Then at 1.3 seconds, guy turns around. At 2.4 seconds, uh, girl smiles. Uh, at 24 seconds, a car smashes through. So you got hundreds of pages of all these things, and we would have to hit in some way, make music and hit all of these different points.
Right.
Okay. And so that's for the first like 10 to 15 years I was scoring movies. That's the way it was done. We didn't have QuickTime. We didn't have digital audio stations. We had no way to do it other than those notes and these calculations. That's basically the way it was done.
That sounds so stressful.
Well, it was not uncomplicated at all, and you had to really study and know what you were doing. It was, that's what it was. That was just the technical side, and then you had to make all that into music, right?
Right.
Right? Obviously. So basically, that's what it was. So like on a thing like Laser Blast, with this humongous budget, you know, Joel and I, we ended up with like 300 odd pages of these music notes, and we would score these scenes. I.e., I would again in those days. I did it with paper and pencil, and a piano and an eraser, and I'd write out the music, and and do all the calculations, like I just described.
Right.
Then go into the studio that we had conned in one manner or the other, and start recording it, with various synthesizers and pianos and drums and whatever the hell it was, right? That existed in the.
Sure.
So that's basically what it was.
I'd love to get your recollection on something like this. So I'm pretending I'm in your shoes at this point. I complete all the music. It's submitted. Are you getting notes on some of the music that you've created, or is it just you're creating it and then once it's done, everything gets submitted and then you're done and you're patiently waiting to see whether does somebody have to come back and say, this works, we like this, we're gonna put it in? What do you recall about when you're done recording everything and that process?
Right. Well, remembering back to that particular project is a little bit difficult since it was a few years ago, but even so back then and in many ways today, you try your best to communicate to whoever the powers to be, if it's the director or whoever, the producer and director. They want to hear as best as possible, like what themes you're going to use or what vibe, that sort of thing. Today we all, you're sitting in a studio like this one, and we can do mock-ups and we can do all this stuff, and it's quite easy to communicate. Back then didn't have any of this stuff. You try best to communicate with whoever the powers to be is, producer, director, whatever, and show them themes and and try to keep them in the loop. But back then, like I was saying, we didn't have all this stuff, so you couldn't really do mock-ups easily and all that. So a lot of the time for those first 10, 12 years, whatever it was, I'd have the producer and or director come over to my house, and I'd sit there on a piano and play some piano and play the themes and try to emulate whatever sound. Like if it was something sensitive, I'd be going da, 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 on piano, and if it was bombastic, chun, 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 chun. I mean, however we could communicate. Music's so hard to talk, right?
Right.
So you would do what you can. Today's very different. We can do mock-ups and do things in different ways to be able to preview it. The one thing about music, and this has always been elusive for from the beginning, is that you really don't. There's really no way to communicate how something is going to sound until it's done. So on a lot of bigger movies, it was not uncommon for somebody to do the score, to complete the score, record the score with the whole orchestra and all that, and then to have the score thrown out. I mean, it's happened to the biggest and best composers in history. They just don't the producers or powers to be, they just don't like it. But in the low budget or no budget realm of things, it's a little different. There's not the money to spend to, here's $500,000 to go do a score. I mean, let's see if we like it. Yeah, that exists today,
Right.
but with the ability to do these mock-ups and all that, it's very different than what it used to be. back, in the 60s, 70s, or what have you.
So after Laser Blast and things started ramping up for you, can you recall what it was like for you to be able to first score a film where you got to work with an orchestra?
Yeah, well, that came like within a year after Laser Blast was my first um, score with an orchestra, which was The Day Time Ended. That and that was for me an incredible experience because I actually managed to. Uh, it was again very low budget, but there was just enough to record with an orchestra. Not here because it was very expensive here, but in England.
Okay.
So I went to London and managed to put together about a 35 piece orchestra in London, and that was the very first orchestral score that I ever did. And what's interesting about that score is it eventually came out on a digital LP, and it ended up being one of the first two scores ever released on a digital LP. The first one was Star Trek, the original Star Trek by Jerry Goldsmith. The second digital LP score was Daytime Ended. There was just one of those weird things
Yeah.
at the very beginning to be able to put out a digital a digital LP in that day. It was very, very unique to be able to do it. Not like just an LP today, it's different. But back then, digital LPs were very unusual at the time.
Is the stress for something like that at the time insurmountable to you, or
Oh, it's off the wall. I mean, I had never done an orchestral score yet. This was my first score, and of all places, I'm going to record it with part of the London Symphony in England. I was a nervous wreck.
right?
I didn't I didn't know how this was going to turn out. When I did Laser Blast with Joel, we're putting it together piece by piece, sort of
Right.
stuff, and we could hear it. But this was done the old-fashioned way. All I had was music paper, and I would write it and orchestrate it and all that, and send it to the copyist, and copyist would send it over to England, and I didn't know whether it was going to be the biggest disaster, whether anything was going to work or not until it was in the recording studio, and we were recording the first cue, and when it all was sounding like the way I had envisioned it, then that was that was one of the biggest highs I ever had in my life. There's no
I can
question about it.
I can imagine. So you are, and you're writing this own music yourself. Like, do you have to, back in the day when you would write music, are you having to write this on paper note by note for the entire,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
this is every instrument, violins and
Everything.
uh,
It was full orchestra.
I
Well, that's the way I did it even up to this point when I do stuff with orchestra, it's the same
yeah,
thing. But yeah, back then it was all on paper. Today you can do a lot of that, on your digital workstations, on computers. There are lots of, shortcuts and all that. But ultimately, especially back then, no, it was all handwritten, all orchestrated by me. Every instrument,
incredible.
all that.
Have you been able to keep on to your do you call those manuscripts the original, sheets that you write all the music on? I don't know if that's the term for that, but do you keep, or do you have a lot of the originals for
Yeah,
a lot of your movies?
I have a fair amount, I would say. Yeah,
Yeah,
I try to keep as much as I can. A lot have gotten lost over the years, and some got lost in trade. But I have a fair amount.
that's so, yeah, amazing to me. Uh, I would really be I'm really excited to talk to you. I guess really a lot about the Empire times, and this is when your brother Charlie is just revving up with these movies, and there's so many films I could ask you about. One of them I would love to is certainly Troll, which is one of my favorites. But before I ask you about scoring a movie like this, Was this something that was important to you or that you enjoyed seeing when your scores came out on from the I forget which record label this was, Restless Records,
Mhm.
which is from Enigma. Was this something that you were, in like, did you collect your own vinyls of your scores and things like that? Were you
Oh,
into this
yeah.
sort of thing? And
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. No, well, first of all, I was and still am to this day extremely proud of that score. I think it's certainly in probably my top 8 or 10 scores even to this day. I think it's a really, really good score.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, you'd be surprised in the notoriety that gets, especially the song in it, the troll song, and all of it. I mean, in fact, it was just last year in July that I was invited to Spain. Once a year, they have a film music festival, and last year in July, I was invited. I was the uh, I guess guest of honor. They gave me a life achievement award there, and
Incredible.
they had 2 nights, rather 3 nights of concerts. 2 nights of which they played these long suites of a lot of my music, probably 20 or 30. Uh, uh, well, over 30 minutes. About each night, they had about a 15, 20 minute suite of my music that were a medley of a lot of the scores that I had done.
Right.
So no, that was obviously a a very nice thing for them to do, and they were performed with the full orchestra and choir and everything. So it was a big to do. Um, the reason I bring that up is because, without question, I would say the most favorite score that I did over there by far is Troll. They I don't know
That's
why
amazing.
they adore Troll. They were just went nuts over Troll, and it was, yeah.
You're like a rock star over there.
It happens to be one of their all-time favorites over there, and so we did perform a couple of pieces from Troll over there. The orchestra did.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, no, I love that score, and this that the song, Herba Way song, and that whole thing for sure.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
There are certainly a few scores I wanna ask you about specifically, but, are you working very closely with your brother during this time? And he talked about how in the heyday of the Empire Films days, he was on top of the world. He describes when he built his offices, when he bought the big facility. I think that was that in Italy?
Yeah, De Laurentiis Studios, you're right.
The De Laurentiis Studios. He describes a moment where he's sitting at the desk, this gigantic desk he's at, and he's kicking his feet up, and he's like, I can't believe we're doing this. Is this as much of a wild ride for you creatively, with making music? And was it a stress-free time for you? Did you feel like with your brother at the helm with a lot of these projects, you didn't there was a personal connection that made things a little bit easier? Or was there even a higher expectation because of your personal connection with Charles at this time?
Definitely a much higher expectation.
Because he could be very honest with you, I'm assuming.
Well, it's not that he could be honest with me. Yes, he could be, and was, but from the from the outset of when we started working together, I had the onus on me, basically, to prove that this was not a situation of nepotism, right?
Oh,
Oh, I'm
absolutely.
gonna have my brother do the score. He's here, sort of thing. So uh, I had to go beyond what anybody else would have been expecting, and and my whole goal, and I think you've probably read it in other articles and interviews that I've done. My whole goal with doing the films with at Empire, or even some of the full moon ones, was I wanted to elevate music in, let's call them, low budget films. I wanted to elevate it, the production value, and bring it up to an A level score.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
felt that if these films had an A level score, that weren't done, that were not done, with a couple of shitty Farfisa synthesizers and just written off as, cheap little exploitation movies and all that. That if the music was like an, if it was an A, uh, was A music, even if it was for a B film, that the whole production level would come way up. And I think, and I think my brother felt similar. Well, I think everybody had to be convinced of that originally, but after a few films and the success that started happening because of that, um, as well as the, sorry, you heard high pitch. My dog is having a dream. So,
It's no problem, no problem.
um, the if you put the music along with very, very good cinematography and production value, these production values, that these B films, um, they came up significantly. They came up various levels, and they started being considered um, more seriously than just another shitty exploitation film or just a B film. So that was always my whole goal, was to lift the production to a whole different level. That's why I think that Empire and Full Moon and all this, I think it's found its unique place in cinema history, right?
Right. That's
That that
yes.
that is unique unto itself, and so that was always my goal. Going back to your question, it was because of that I felt that I had to go well beyond what anybody else would do, and I put myself uh, very much into it, not only because it was family and I wanted it to be good, but for the reasons that I was stating, and I kind of had to constantly be not only proving myself, but upping that game so that the values were better and better and better. I think in the long run, after now close to 50 years of doing this, I think I was probably right in the sense that I think a lot of my music has been recognized as being very good film music for a lot
Incredible.
of, certainly not all of them, but for a lot of these films. Otherwise, I don't think I'd, you know, be invited, around the world to be given concerts and life achievement awards. So I think the value is paid
Yeah.
off, and that decision has paid off. But it cost me a lot too. I mean, I basically put a lot of monies into these things. There were films that I never made a dime. There were films where I lost money. I lost over $15,000 with Reanimator because these were package deals. These weren't like studio films, where the composer's given a fee, and the production company picks up, the cost of the orchestra and everything else. These were deals where I was given X amount of money, to do a score, and if I didn't deliver, I'd be screwed, and I had to deliver, and which meant if I had to go into my own pocket, which happened on various occasions, then I had to do that. Reanimated was one of those situations where I lost money. Uh, so
What about when those scores come out on vinyl? Do you get any stake in that, being that you're the author of the soundtracks?
yes, but again, that's unique to me. Not in all cases, but
Yeah.
in many cases, um, because because of uh, because of the approach that we took and that I took back in those days. I wrote into some contracts, certainly not all of them, whereby I would have participation in soundtrack rights and publishing and what have you. Um, Probably in about 50-60% of the cases that was the case. That's the independent market. If you're doing a film for a studio film, like, if it was something like Metal Storm, for Universal, uh,
Classic.
no way, they're taking everything.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, so it depends. The independent game, as opposed to the studio game, is very different in that way.
You mentioned Reanimator. I know when I talk to people that were obviously fans of Empire Days, Reanimator is probably. I mean, the score for Reanimator is a character in and of itself, and it's incredible, especially the opening. with that beautiful montage at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you on that. I mean, fantastic. And was there safe to say there was some like the Bernard Herrmann? You
Mhm.
have. I'm assuming you're a big fan of his.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. I
When
mean,
I-
the story originally that the credit that was left out of on the film itself, on the end titles of the film, there was supposed to be a credit at the end. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was supposed to be with sincere apologies or sincere acknowledgement. Oh no, with full acknowledgement and sincere apologies to the great Bernard Herrmann. That was supposed to be a credit at the end of the film,
Mhm.
um, and it got left out. And back in those days, to reshoot a whole end title, I was given the option. Well, they didn't have the money to do it, but if I wanted to put up the $10,000,
Oh no, it's
yeah,
like no, I'm gonna go worry about it.
I had already lost close to $20,000 in recording that because I did it in Italy, and the recording was very problematic. So, uh, but anyway, that did appear on various CDs and LPs later on.
Yeah, well, it's just a gorgeous it's gorgeous music, and I love the addition of the drums in the beginning too, with the kick drum. It hit because
Right.
I have the vinyl record of that. Companies like Death Waltz have put out those scores on vinyl now, and they're 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 so incredible. It was amazing how there's a whimsical nature to these soundtracks that I imagine just trying to come up with these personalities that that this music has in some of these movies that you've scored, and it seems so daunting. I wouldn't even know how to create it. So yeah, when you say that, you've made an impact, it's amazing how it's amazing to when I talk to people how much they love, I mean, truly love the music from some of these movies. And if
Oh,
I yeah, go
and
ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, oh, no, thank you. And yeah, I mean, it, different movies call for different things, but yeah, some movies, uh, the music can become a character unto itself. Other movies, you can't separate the movie from the music. I think Reanimator is one. Certainly, Puppet Master is another one. Nobody can think of Puppet Master and not think of the music with the film.
Mhm.
And so there are definitely examples of that.
Yeah.
I get you.
And when I think of, I want to ask you about Puppet Master, because if everybody that watches my channel knows that is in my top 10 horror movies of all time is Puppet Master. But one of the ones I would love to get your recollection on, and when I think of the Empire Day, for sure, I think one of the biggest of the movies that came out during that time was Ghoulies, and that's another one where I just think it, to say that you didn't to say that you nailed the exact kind of music that those characters needed, that type of movie, it's just fascinating to me. What do you recall about the when you were scoring Ghoulies?
It's interesting because when I was doing Ghoulies, I mean that was a very busy period in my life, and I was scoring like three movies at once, and they didn't have almost any budget for Ghoulies for music, but there was just enough to do original score on maybe 20-25 minutes of the movie. Um, and most people don't know this, but I actually that we recorded roughly those original 20-25 minutes, and that's the main Ghoulies theme and various parts of it that most people are familiar with. But a lot of the rest of the music was actually tracked from other films I had done, like The Alchemist and uh, I can't remember now, but there were three or four other films that I had already scored
Mhm.
and that I own the music to, and so we used some of the music in those other films to track into Ghoulies. But the original music that was in that was scored for Ghoulies, uh, that that there was just enough money to have like one decent session, right, with a small orchestra here in LA, and that made a big difference. And it was You know, it's so hard to say. I guess I think you're the tie-in, and maybe this is maybe in the band blood. I don't know how else to put it, but there's definitely a relationship uh, that maybe stems back to my brother and my upbringing. The fact that we were very much into comics, like Marvel comics and DC comics. We grew up together, loving those and those themes, and of course, we both grew up obviously in the movie business because of my father. So maybe. Um, Maybe following suit and us working together on a lot of projects over the years, uh, maybe it's my understanding of where his brain is with the fantasy and the puppets and the horror, but with the quirkiness and satire, you know, not
Right.
super serious, and you know, it's an ingredient, right? That it's one of those unexplainable type things that just seems to be there for our whole lives. And so, you know, in 90% of the cases when I've done a score for my brother, he doesn't have to tell me what to do. I mean,
It's in the blood. You guys know you're on the
I
same.
inherently I come up with it. I kind of know what the gist is, right? And the creative process just, you know, takes over.
So I have kind of a two-part question. The first, and I want to say this to you, is to me the theme for Puppet Master
Hmm.
is to me is iconic as John Carpenter's Halloween score about anything. It is one of I get so many feelings of whether it be nostalgia or just it's incredible to listen to the theme for Puppet Master. I'll never forget my first time hearing it. It was one of those things where I never forgot it. Something that is so thematic like that. I'm a humble musician. I play in bands myself in guitar. Sometimes our my when me and my band write, sometimes the songs we'll write, they just come into our head when I'm driving in the shower. The theme for Puppet Master, in my mind, before you answer this, I feel like you're gonna say it came to me. I can't imagine you sat down and you started to try to just work that out because it's such a perfect. I mean, you can hum it. It's so it's something you can hum. It's so thematic. Does the theme for Puppet Master, does it just come to you, or do you actually sit down and work something like that out piece by piece?
Okay. The my creative process, uh, it's it each project has a slightly different each project I have a slightly different way that things happen, but there's a commonality to it. For me, the first thing when I sit down and it's a blank piece of paper, right? There's no music, nothing's been done yet. I have to understand clearly what the film is first. I have to have it together in my head. I have to understand the characters. I have to understand the uh, the time period. I have to understand the motivation. I have to be crystal clear in my head as to what the music needs to do to make the movie work as best as it possibly can.
Right.
So intellectually, I start with it intellectually. I have to understand it clearly. That's number one for me. I can't proceed something blindly. I have to understand it and its motivations. So each film is a little bit different, but the one commonality between all of them is I have to understand it clearly, and the characters, like I said, characters motivation, point A to B, C all the way to Z. Now, in the case of Puppet Master, it wasn't that different. So before I ever sat down at a keyboard and did anything, I had to put it together in my head. I said, well, what am I scoring? First of all, the fact is, and when I'm talking about Puppet Man, I'm talking about the original film now, okay? Of course, it translates into the other films, but let's talk just the original Puppet Master film. What is it about that film? The fact is, it takes place at the beginning or during World War II. So the period piece has to do with that time period, has to do with Nazis, has to do with a good person, Toulon, right, who is actually a good person, and how he's being persecuted by the Nazis, and how the puppet characters were all people at some point, and he actually put their souls into these puppets almost as a savior.
Right.
Okay. Therefore, so you've got the time element, the period element rather, right, of Toulon and during the World War II Nazi period. You have the fact that he's a magician of sorts who somehow has this mysterioso ability to put these souls of these real people into the puppets. And you have the fact that these puppets, even though they do horrible things, they're the actual good guys, because the things they're doing horrible things to are the bad guys.
Right.
So therefore, you have to feel empathy for those characters, for Toulon, for the puppets themselves, the souls themselves. There's an element of empathy and sadness to it. And then you have the period itself, Nazis, World War II, and all that. So before I ever write a note, in this case for Puppet Master, I had to be clear in my brain what the motivation was, where should the music come from? And this is why I've always described music as being a third element in a two-dimensional medium, the third dimension in a two-dimensional medium. Two-dimension, we're seeing film, we hear, we see, but what is that third dimension? Third dimension is the emotional dimension within ourselves, and how we translate that from empathy or fear or all those things we do. As a composer, you're supposed to do or should do as a composer, how those things happen. So, Puppet Master, I haven't even sat down yet, but I understand it.
Right.
Now I sit down and I say, okay, well, what was very endemic in that period? What was, musically speaking, what did the Germans, Austrians, and Nazis, what was almost their favorite type of music for that period? And you know what it was? Waltzes. That's what it was.
Oh,
Austrian waltzes,
it
right?
is a waltz.
And it's a waltz. Bum, 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 da, 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 da. It's a waltz, very pure and simple.
Wow.
So that's the first thing that comes into my mind. Second thing that comes into my mind is the more whimsical nature of the puppets themselves. And that's the B section, the more lively, almost circus-like part of
Right. The little cues and things. Yeah.
right. So those were the two ingredients, along with the Mysterioso part and all the other stuff in there. Those were, to me, the most important ingredients. So right off the bat, I, from a creative standpoint, knew that the main theme had to have an element of empathy, sadness, period being waltz because of that period of and the location. The Germans, they love waltzes. The puppet aspect, right? And the circus-like atmosphere, because after all, they are puppets. That's how the process works for me. And that's not different than almost any other film I do. That's where I have to start intellectually. It has to make sense to me. That's where my creative process comes from.
I never put together that it was. And just a nerdy question. So for my audience, I apologize. Is Puppet Master, is it 3/4 or is it 6/8? time?
It could be either. I mean, it's
Could be
basically
either?
it's a 3/4, but it could be 6/8. Doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Yeah, I never put together that it was a waltz, but it makes perfect sense. That theme, I mean, it's just so haunting and magical. I just wanna tell you how I don't know, it really is one of my favorite it certainly is just one of my favorite pieces of music, and, yeah, so obviously, I just wanted it's a pleasure to be able to ask you about Puppet Master because of how much I love that film, but if I could
Uh-huh.
I don't wanna keep you too much longer, but I'd be so remiss not to just tell you what I think this is just my opinion, what I think is one of your most underrated scores of all time, and I genuinely mean it, is Demonic Toys. I think
Mm.
it is such a home run soundtrack, and just like Puppet Master, you were able I mean, if somebody was telling me, "I need you to make a score about these toys that are possessed and have these personalities," the intro music for Demonic Toys, it sets the tone. I mean, I can't imagine the score being even 1% different than what you did because it's just perfect, and I just find that score I don't know how often you get asked about Demonic Toys, but I truly find that to be one of your absolute just best soundtracks.
Well, thank you, but, it's interesting, no, I like the theme, the overall the soundtrack as well, but, I've always really regarded, um, themes and motifs as being really important in film scoring, and it's something that I find very lacking today. Um, it's really important, I think, to write good themes, um, and good motifs for films. It's the kind of thing that when you walk out of a movie theater or wherever you see it, it if that sort of thing can stick with you, it's a big benefit, to the audience, and it helps clarify a lot of the story, and characters as well. And it's something that's being lost these days. You hear a lot of atmospheric type stuff. These days you hear a lot of, percussive type stuff, effecty stuff, but there's not too many people writing good themes anymore because it takes some time, I guess. Things have to be done so fast today, unfortunately, that maybe that's part of the problem. They come and they say, "Well, we need this, in 3 days. We need this in a week. We need it in 2 weeks. Whatever it is," and so what are you going to do? You're going to do the best you can,
Right.
but it takes uh, themes, 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 and motifs are the ingredients that I believe make us that stick to the characters and circumstances in movies. And a lot of what you've been asking about today, when you say, I nailed this or I nailed that, it took a little time and a creative process to come up with those, because you have to think things through. Otherwise, you're just sitting there, you know hitting your keyboard and seeing something that works. It takes a little bit of uh, time and creativity, and um, I don't know. That's just my take
Mm.
on things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There like I said, I can't ask you about every single movie you've done, and I have just a few more questions if I may. One of the films, really quick, I was watching this movie, so there's a company called Scream Factory, which I'm sure you're aware of, and I picked up this movie, and I was really interested because one of my favorite movies was directed by a gentleman named Dan O'Bannon, and so when I learned about this movie called The Resurrected coming out, I was super Chris Sarandon was in it, I was like, "This is fantastic," and I would obviously take this as a huge compliment, where somebody like John Carpenter, when you listen to his music, I think within 5 minutes, I can tell it's a John Carpenter score, but with you, it's like, I mean this is a huge compliment. I love the music in The Resurrected when I was listening to it because 'cause I'll never forget, I finally got a nice sound system in my room when I was listening, and 'cause and the music was gorgeous, and so I went to the special features, and then there you were doing an interview, and I'm like, that was Richard Band doing the soundtrack for this. I mean, do you have any memories from The Resurrected, and do you recall being able to see that film when that came out? Because I find that to be a really hidden gem
Yeah,
and a
no,
great
I agree
film.
with you. You know, here it's a yeah, it's a film that really did not get its due distribution wise. I thought it was a very good film, and although I didn't work closely with Dan O'Bannon, I did meet with him a few times and ran into him actually a few years after the release. He had a very up and down relationship with the producers, and at one point they had a separation or whatever. So I didn't get to work closely with Dan, but I do know that he did love the score for the movie, and it is a bit of a gem of a movie. The score was a big score. It was a lot of work on that score, a lot of music in it, decent sized orchestra as you could hear. Uh, again, thematic, but all orchestral in nature. And I just love the what I remember about the score and what I liked about it and the movie is that the score kind of keeps descending as we go descending into those catacombs and those ancient laboratories, you know, from going back hundreds of years, and it becomes more and more ominous, but uh, in a very thematic way, not just weird, but very atmospheric, but thematically atmospheric again. And it was I like doing that score. I like that kind of
Yeah.
movie a lot, and it definitely did not get the distribution it needed. It was a record company that actually produced that film called Scotty Brothers, long out of existence now, and it was, I think, one of their very first attempts to for distribution, and basically they screwed it all up. And but because I think it's a very very good film. I think it's one of the better H.P. Lovecraft based stories,
I,
personally.
I I couldn't agree more. When I saw it, I was just floored. I was like, why have I never heard of this?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, I know. Well, that's kind of my feeling with a lot of the things that I've done. You
Yeah.
know, uh, I think and this is definitely a compliment that I get a lot of the time. It's just a weird one. They say, "Man, you've written some of the best music for some of the most unseen films ever." So, what are you gonna do?
Um, if I can, Richard, just a few more questions. I'm so gracious of the time you've given me. I don't want to keep you too long. So can you tell me, because when I was doing research about you during the 90s, 2000s, I think it would be better for me to just try to ask you, what are some things that you've worked on that, let's just say, the average horror movie sci-fi fan person wouldn't know, whether it be I saw you did a lot of work with television and things like that, and I'm sure I've heard your work way more than I've realized in my everyday life. What can you tell me about the the latter years post your full moon
Right.
tenure and things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always liked films. I like film work. I'm not crazy about doing television, although I've done a fair amount. I really enjoyed a lot of the work I did on Stargate, the series Stargate.
Right, right. I was reading about that. I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with the show, but I did read about that.
Wow, you never saw Stargate SG-1? It was like it had three offshoots, probably 12 years or 10 years of very good stuff.
Yeah, I had
You,
never. Yeah.
well, you should look that up. Start with a Stargate SG-1.
Okay.
Uh, it's interesting that some things take full circle. Like we started with Joel Goldsmith about talking about Joel, who sadly died about 7 years ago, much too early. But Joel and I worked on and off together on various things. I would help him with things; he'd help me with things. Over decades and decades. and uh, Joel got the account to do the original Stargate SG-1 series, and for a variety of reasons, he couldn't do some of them, so he brought me on, and I did a bunch of them over the first 2 or 3 years. Ended up having music in about 18 or 20 shows. It's a very good series. You should, yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. And so the reason I bring that up is that was one of the better experiences I had with doing television. And it's got some good music, some good themes in it, and all that. So you may want to look that up. It's a very good
Yes, sir.
series.
I will. Absolutely.
And on the other side of the coin, I did a few. Remember the series Walker, Texas Ranger?
Chuck Norris, of course.
Oh, that's right. I did a bunch of those for a season,
Fantastic.
and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people don't necessarily know that I've done.
Right.
Oh, definitely, people don't know that for 7 years I had the Warner Brothers Kids account, and I did hundreds and hundreds of animated, short animated sequences for the kids' morning hour. WB used to have like a 3 hour cartoon block on Saturday mornings, and they had all this animated stuff. So I did for 7 years. I had that account where I did all this really fun animated uh, music, and that people wouldn't know that I did stuff like that, right? Out of the blue. Or by the same token, uh, I did a bunch of music for Disney's "Sing Me a Story" with Belle. I mean, there's
Yeah.
it's kind of funny where people, that they obviously, most people regard me, as sci-fi, horror, genre stuff, and all that. But I loved doing the fun, the animated stuff, some comedy stuff. Well, even in the Full Moon Paramount days, with movies like
Pre-Hysteria.
Right, or Remote, those
Yeah.
films. I always loved doing those. It was different. It was fun, more uplifting, and
Absolutely.
there's a lot there, and I don't know how we got into that question.
Well, I was asking you basically, for the fans like me and others that know you, of course, for a lot of the classic 80s and 90s titles, the stuff that we would maybe have heard music wise that we just didn't realize it was you,
Oh,
whether it be on TV or things like that.
right.
Yeah. I'm sure I lived through a lot of those. I remember the WB. When you say the WB, we talking about the channel when they had a WB
Yeah,
channel.
right.
See, I lived that as a kid, so I'm sure I heard you on
Yeah,
a
there's
on a
no
weekly basis.
question, because there were probably for the average 3 hour block, there were probably 50 to 60 little animated segments on each show. No
Right.
question about it. Yeah, so
So one of the last things I definitely want to ask you about, if I can, I am extremely excited. I was listening to your brother talk about finally completing the David Allen Prime Evils,
yes, yes.
and I really am just over the moon. I've got the I ordered all these. There's a Blu-ray that a company called Umbrella's putting out, and they already have it on pre-order. It's this nice, gorgeous release with these art cards, and I got that pre-order. I'm so excited. But I did notice, because I follow your account on Spotify, so whenever there's something new from Richard Band uploaded on there, I'll get a notification of it. And I saw Primevals is listed on there. I'd
Mhm.
love to know, was this, I haven't listened to it yet because I'm saving myself to be able to experience it when I see the film for the
Right.
first time. But I would like to know, with the film being completed over the last number of years post David Allen's passing, was music done in the recent years for this movie, or is there stuff that you had worked on before?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's better to keep up with me through richardbandmusic.com,
Okay.
because that's my website, and basically everything I put out is through that site. And the soundtrack came out about 3-4 weeks ago for Primevals, and I think it's probably one of the best things I've done in the past 15 years. It's
Excellent.
it's a big, big, big epic score. In fact, I recorded a good part of it in Bratislava with a big orchestra, and this is this is a big epic, no question about it. So you should definitely listen to the CD. But I would agree, listen to them, watch the movie first. Although either one is going to be, you'll have fun. But no, that was something that I recorded uh, about a year and a half ago. All the music is new. We both know the history of Primevals, that it's taken over 3 to 4 decades to get the film, completed. But finally it was completed, and I scored it, like I said, about a year and a half ago. Well, now closer to 2 years, and it's well, you're gonna have to listen to it. It's one of
I'm
the best things I've done in the last 15 years.
uh, I'm
No,
very excited.
it's a big, big, epic score. No, no,
Incredible.
no question. Go onto my site,
I
richardbandmusic.com,
have it pulled up.
and there's a few preview cues that you can probably listen to on
Excellent.
there as well. But yeah, that's going to come out, not only the big Blu-ray box set and all that they're putting out, but I think it's going to stream within a matter of a few weeks. Premiere on Shutter, I think, or Netflix. I don't know, one of the streaming
Mhm.
channels. So it's around the corner.
Yeah, I did see that it got I forgot where Charles premiered it at a festival or some theater or something, but I wish I could have been there.
Yeah, no, it premiered at the Fantasia Festival.
Fantasia,
Had
Fantasia.
a huge reception, and it also premiered at Stiges in Spain, which is the big festival in Spain, and everybody loved it. Yeah, it's a must see.
I'm
No, no,
so excited.
yeah,
Well, so excited. I'm glad to hear that it sounds like, to hear you say you think it's some of your best work too, it's just incredible. But that makes sense. I mean, you've got so much experience to you. It's probably I mean, I feel like you could do this in your sleep at this point, but,
no. I wish I could. No,
so
no,
yes, I would love to end this with this right here, Richard. So many people probably come up to you all the time and tell you what they think your best score is, what their favorite is. I would love it if you can. I'm asking you this on the fly. The top 5 Richard band scores.
oh God. Okay, uh, I'll put I'll put Primevals in that top five because it's one of the more recent, and it really is a big epic score.
Yes, sir.
So I'll put that up there. Uh, I think I think Troll is in there.
I was gonna say I would agree with
I
that.
think Troll is in there. From Beyond is definitely in there.
Fantastic. I love your is that an or I'm assuming that's an original poster you have on the wall behind you.
Uh, where,
Just right,
yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I forgot that I had. Oh yeah,
Gorgeous artwork.
Metal Storm and From
Metal
Beyond.
Stone, incredible. Yeah, those are beautiful.
Um, so those are three. So Troll from Beyond. Oh boy. Musically or thematically, Puppet Master is probably in there. Um, not so much the score as a total, but the themes are definitely in there. I don't know. It's a hard question.
It's tough. I know it's tough.
It's a that's a hard
But
question.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, Reanimator's probably in there somewhere, and Resurrect.
Resurrected, I was hoping you're gonna throw in there. I truly and I'm sure you agree, I still think a lot of people need to go and see that movie, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a really good movie. I think other than Reanimator and maybe From Beyond, it's it's in the top two or three Lovecraft
HB.
films ever made. I think.
I completely agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I have I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving me your time to talk to you. I mean, you such an influence on me and the things that you've done, and, I'm excited, like I said, to see Primevals and to hear your music. I have your website pulled up, so I'm definitely gonna go listen to some cues. I want to save myself, but at the same time, I am at the edge of my seat, and I'm excited about that. Do you ever go to Texas Frightmare, the conventions? Because that's kind of where I can kind of
Yeah,
go.
I did a couple of years ago. I know it's coming up this month. I'm not invited this year. Probably will be there next year because of the 40th anniversary of Reanimators next year. So
Yeah,
I'll probably do that. I am going to be in Pennsylvania in June, late June, and actually, I may. This is by no means confirmed, but I may actually come down to New Orleans, which for a couple of days. I've never been to New Orleans, and I'm dying to go. And since I'm on that side of the country, well, not that it's on that side, but it's closer than LA. I thought maybe I'd venture on down to New Orleans for a couple of days.
that's where I grew up. Hurricane Katrina moved me out of New Orleans, but I grew up in Saint Bernard Parish.
Oh, right in the
So
parish. Wow, wow.
yeah,
How
yeah.
far away are you now from New Orleans?
About 5 hours. I'm in North Louisiana now.
Okay,
It's such a culture shock. It's like different planets, much less different states.
I'm sure.
It's redneck country up here. Down there, it's Cajun,
Yeah, yeah.
it's totally different.
Yeah,
So,
well, I can imagine. But I've never been to New Orleans, which I consider a crime in my life.
you'll love it, yeah.
Before I kick the bucket, I've got to experience it. So since I'm in Pennsylvania, so it's a couple hours away. It wouldn't be too bad to go down there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Plus, down there is Waxworks Records, who puts out a bunch of my vinyls. They're
You
based
just
in New Orleans, so
oh,
maybe
you'll be a god if you walk in there.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Reanimator is what launched the company. Now they're the most successful company, uh, vinyl company out there. They're doing incredibly well.
Yep, I have it. I have the very first pressing they did of Reanimator too. Yeah,
Excellent,
but
excellent.
I always prefer when I can get the original pressings of stuff from the '80s. I don't like those 180 grams as much as just the classic thin black vinyl. I love that sort of stuff.
I know. Well, different age, different things.
So
But what I like about what Waxwork and some of the other people are doing is they're adding new artists to do the cover interpretations and stuff.
sure,
I think that's a really good idea, and I'm all for the resurgence of vinyls anyway. So
absolutely.
it's a good thing, no matter how you cut it.
I know my audience greatly enjoyed this, and I appreciate it so much. And so the last thing is for people to keep up with you on the latest of everything. I'm
Right.
assuming the website.
Yep. Website richardbandmusic.com. That's or obviously Facebook or Instagram, or what's it called, X or whatever the hell it's
Twitter,
called.
X, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but basically, yeah, Facebook and Instagram and the website. That's I'm easily reachable, and that way people, keep up with what I'm doing and so
Yeah.
forth. When are you going to do this one? When is this going to go on?
In a couple days, I'm sure. Maybe tomorrow. I'm
Okay,
just gonna, yeah. I have to
you
make
should,
one little edit in here, but
when you're ready, you should send me a link, and I can post it on my website so people can go to it as well.
I will do that. I'll email it to
I'll
you.
get it up there. As soon as you send it to me, within a day, I can get it up there. So people go to my site, then uh, they can
Yeah.
click on the link and go watch it on yours.
Absolutely. It really was an honor. And for my audience, thank you for watching this. This was the great legend, Richard Band, and I appreciate you guys watching. Huge, giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.